Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today's video is all about pruning your tomato plants, removing the leaves on the bottom, get some airflow going, and just maintaining them. This is a long video, so just use the timestamps to jump to the different parts, that are most interesting to you. I'm going to be talking about several ways to prune. Number one, there's no exact way to prune. In fact, you don't even have to prune tomatoes. Tomatoes are vines. They would naturally fall over, sprawl along the ground. Wherever the stem touches the ground, it would root out, and you could grow tomatoes that way. Except they get unruly, they get too big. So we typically stake them up. I'll be talking about staking too. These are a couple of my indeterminate tomatoes. Number one, determinate variety tomatoes get to a set height, flower, produce fruit over a short period of time. You don't really need to prune those. Often you don't need to stake them. Maybe you remove some of the leaves for airflow. So we're not talking about determinate varieties today. We're talking about indeterminate tomatoes that will just grow and grow and grow until disease or frost comes and takes them out. So we want to stake them up a post. We want to manage them to some capacity. I'm going to show you a couple different plants to start to give you some ideas about pruning. So if we start over, then all these plants went in at the same time, where seeds started at the same time. The giant Belgium there is a little bit smaller. Just wanted to cut in because this is a longer video. Skip around as you wish. I'm going to show you how I take the tomatoes you see in the video, prune them up, and take them to this. So this is what we're going to do over the next 60 minutes, really pruning the indeterminate tomatoes in kind of different styles. Single stem, double stem, triple stem, multi-stem. We'll talk about cherry tomatoes, but this is what we're going to get to, and this is what you're going to learn throughout the video. As we come over here to the green zebra, it's larger. You see this whole branch coming over here. This was a sucker. Suckers are not bad. That's the next point I want to make. They are production stems. They just come out of the joints in the flowers. We'll be identifying the suckers shortly, but here's the main stem, a leaf, and right out of the joint is the sucker, which is going to turn right into this big guy here, and it's going to produce leaves and flowers, and it's going to produce fruit. If you let every sucker go, the plant just gets unruly. So we're just really trimming it to manage the size, and how you trim or how you prune your plant is really based on how much space you give them, how many tomatoes you want to get off of there, and again, it's not an exact science. Coming over to this side, I have more tomatoes. Again, these are all indeterminate varieties. Larger tomatoes, 6-8 ounces up to 12 ounces. They're the bigger tomatoes, baseball size, etc. And you can see that they're just growing a little bit differently. They look very similar. When you come over to the brandywines, right over here, this plant is growing more vertically, meaning it's not bushing out with all these production stems, and it's just kind of going straight up. We're going to prune this guy probably down to 2 main stems, single stem pruning, double stem pruning I'll be talking about. And there's another brandywine over there, and you can see they just grow a little bit differently. They even have a different leaf. It looks more like a potato than a standard kind of tomato plant. Let's take a look at some cherry tomatoes, because I grow those completely differently. I want them to go up a cattle panel and just spread out all over the place. This is a Sweet Cherry 100, approaching 4 feet tall. All kinds of different stems. That's not the stem that came out of the ground. You start with a single stem, comes out of the ground, and then in that joint where the leaf and stem are, the suckers come out. This is a sucker, and everybody feels like they have to get rid of them. You don't have to get rid of them. You can keep them. That came out of the joint from the main stem and the leaf, and you can see that it's starting to produce flowers. So the more, in quotes, suckers that you let grow, the more tomatoes you're going to get. In this case, I'm going to be weaving these over the cattle panel. Here are some more cherry tomato types, and you can just see that they're kind of growing a little more crazily. They're bushier, lots of vines, lots of production stems. Let's come over here so you can see all the flowers on here. And again, these are all what a lot of people call suckers. You let them grow, they produce fruit. So now we have to make some decisions on how we want to prune. Let's go back to the larger indeterminate type tomatoes. The first thing you want to be able to do is identify what the suckers are, and you're going to make decisions whether or not you want to keep them. So out of the ground, that is our main stem, comes up, and then a leaf comes out right here. Leaf comes out right here. right in the joint where the leaf is, and the stem is going to be a production stem. That's going to turn into leaves, fruits, and flowers, and it's going to continue to grow out this way. Now, I bottom prune off eventually a good foot from the soil to the top of the plant to just create airflow and a splash barrier. So these will end up getting removed. If we continue up the stem, another leaf is coming out. Stem continues to go up. Here is another sucker. You could just remove that. If you want to just remove the suckers, you reach into the joint. Remember, leaf, stem, and you just snap them out. And now you've just pruned your tomato plant. It's pretty easy to do once you understand how the stems grow. So coming up the stem, leaf, right in the joint, there's the main stem, there's the leaf, there's another sucker. I'm going to remove that. So for my brandywine, I'm going to be removing the lower suckers, as you see. Pop that one out too. You can pinch it. You really don't want to smash it like I am. You can snip it off with some scissors or something like that. But you can see as I'm working my way up the plant, I'm removing the production stems, which is what I like to call them because they really do produce for you, and I'm letting the upper plant split out. So the main stem would continue up this way, and if I kept everything to a single main stem, that's called single stem pruning, and I just leave one stem, and it's always, you know, flowers, or just like leaf, and then it would be a sucker, which could be removed, then flowers, and then the main stem keeps going, leaf, another sucker's going to grow right up there, and then more flowers. So that's like probably 10 tomatoes right there. By keeping it on a single stem, you're controlling the number of flowers, the size of the plant, and this plant's probably going to produce, I don't know, 25, 30 tomato plants, something like that, by doing single stem. Let's talk a little bit more about suckers because I just want people to understand what they are, and then we'll go over again single stem, double stem pruning, and some other pruning styles. I think it's really important to understand that you do not have to prune your tomato plants. They are vines. If you don't stake them, they're just going to fall over, they're going to crawl everywhere, and they're going to just produce for you. Now, they're going to get messy with diseases and problems, but you're still going to get tomatoes. We prune to control the size. That's the only real reason we do that. A lot of people say, well, if you prune, you get more tomatoes. That's not really true because you're removing what we call suckers, and when you do that, you're removing future production stems, so you're losing tomatoes. You're only pruning to control size to manage disease. And it is true, if you reduce the number of tomatoes that a plant is producing, maybe those tomatoes are larger, but pruning does not create more tomatoes. In fact, it removes tomatoes from your plant. So real quick, I just want to show you the difference between what I call a sucker and a production stem. A lot of people call, here's a stem coming straight up, leaf comes out, main stem continues, and you see this little guy right in here. People will call that a sucker. You can remove that. And that kills off a future production stem that will actually flower, produce fruit, and will continue to grow. You remove them again to control size, and I'll be talking about that throughout this video. So here is the main stem, and we have a cluster of tomatoes. The main stem continues upward, more flowers formed, more tomatoes, keeps going, more flowers, became more tomatoes, keeps going, more flowers, they're going to turn into tomatoes, keeps going, you see new flowers up here, will turn into tomatoes. And you would just take that and you can manage a single stem going all the way up there. Now, when you come down to here, you see this guy, right where my finger is, believe me, it's coming out of a joint where a leaf is, and it stretches all the way out. That little sucker that I removed, this guy right here, turns into a big production stem where it will produce leaves, and then it's going to flower. The flowers are going to turn into fruit, and it's going to continue just like that first main stem I showed you, and it's going to flower and produce fruit. So now you have a sucker, which I like to call the production stem, turns into a stem that's going to produce flowers and fruit. And then here's another sucker coming out right through here, and it's producing flowers, which will turn into tomatoes. Now, this will become a mess. So We prune them out in different ways and different styles. Let me show you a single stem pruning so you understand what that means. There is no exact way to prune. You can prune however you want, and again, it's to manage the plant size. I usually do what I call chaos pruning. I let the plant grow. I prune it just to keep it in shape. There's a lot of different production stems going here. The bottom will get pruned out. I'll teach you how to do that for the airflow. And I will show you some of my chaos pruning techniques. This one's being shaped to grow a little bit differently. Coming up from the bottom, I've been removing the suckers out of there, and I'm going to remove these leaves for that bottom pruning and let the airflow go. This way, soil-borne diseases don't splash up onto the leaves and kind of work their way up. It's always good to do. Right now, I have, let's see if I can get this, the main stem going up, and it goes right up. Just follow my finger. Flower cluster, tomatoes, keeps going upwards, and that's the single stem. Out of this joint right in here, we have the leaf, the main stem, a sucker came out, and it's producing. And you can see that it has flowers, and it's going to continue to produce. And if I kept this guy over here, I'd have the main stem, and I'd have a second stem. That would be double stem pruning, where I let one of the suckers, again, which I call the production stem, just continue to grow and flower and do its thing. So I'm going to have two main stems, 1, 2, that are growing and producing flowers. That would be double stem pruning. You can do triple stem pruning. After that, we get into what I call the chaos pruning. You're just letting stems grow and you're managing for size. Here's the third stem. Main stem right here, leaf right down there, main stem, and that is the sucker that is grown into a production stem, and it's about to flower. So you really have 3 stems coming from the main one right here. 1 branches over, 2, that's the continuation of the main stem, so that's number 1, 1, 2, and then the third sucker is producing, that's 3. So you can see it forms a nice Y shape, and that would be 3 stems. Now, and then in the back here, you see another stem. I don't want that, so I bend it down, and I'm just going to get my scissors, and I'm just going to get in there and snip it off. Sharp scissors is all you need. If I can do this, and then I'm going to remove that, and that would have been another production stem. I just didn't want 4. So let's look at this again real quick so you get the idea. Main stem coming up, main stem continues. That would be single stem pruning if I removed this guy right here and I removed that guy back there. I'm just keeping one stem open. So now I have main stem, second stem, third stem. I'm going to remove one. I'm going to actually make this a double stem tomato plant. So I'm going to get in there and I'm going to snip off that sucker. I don't like to do it, but that's for the video example and to manage the size of this plant. So I've taken out all the production stems in these joints, and I'm going to leave 2. If I wanted to do single stem, I would just remove this one. This would be pulled out of the picture, and I just keep one stem going up there. And some people like to do that. They feel like they get bigger tomatoes, and you just manage the size better. So I have 2 stems, stem 1, stem 2. Now, for stem 2, I want to look into all the joints where I have a leaf and the second main stem, and you can see a little sucker forming in there. I want to remove that. And then I just see how it's continuing to grow upward. As suckers form into the joints of the leaves up here, I will remove them, and I will keep getting new flower clusters and tomatoes. So this whole second stem is going to produce for me. So we go back to the main stem, and I've got a cluster of flowers. I have tomatoes forming. So here's the first cluster of flowers, there's the tomatoes. Then I'm coming up this main stem, leaf comes out. Here is another sucker, and that has to be removed out because I'm not going to let any more suckers grow in there. And you can cut it as close to the joint as you want. So now it's flower cluster, leaf, production stem, right there has been removed. Another cluster of flowers continues up this way. Another leaf. Right in the joint is another sucker that has to get removed. And then at the tip, you see more flowers. That's going to get tied up. That would be the single stem. This is the second stem. Both of these are going to get tied up. I'll do that, show you what it looks like, and then we'll talk about removing the leaves in the bottom. Here's the Brandywine yellow pruned down to a double stem. And you can see again, you know, we've said it a bunch of times, but main stem 1, sucker, production stem, stem number 2. Tied them off right here. Nice and loose with the tie. Don't tie it tight against the stake. I use the leaf to catch the rope, string, jute, whatever you want to use, and that just keeps everything in place so that your tie doesn't slide down the tomato. And this is going to be perfect. So I'm going to keep this to 2 stems. In the joints where there's a leaf stem, I've removed all the suckers. Now coming down to the bottom, you see that I still have leaves. I want to remove, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't want to take, you know, maybe more than 30% of the plant leaves to go, or at once. You can do it over time. I've let all my tomatoes grow so that I can do this pruning video, and you can really see how they change. So also, you may see yellowing on the bottom of your plants. That's nothing to worry about. Tomato plants will give up their bottom leaves, send nutrition to the top. As it starts getting hot, you're going to see that a whole lot. I'll be doing videos on diseases, what they look like on the leaves, but when you see yellowing down at the bottom, you know, something like this is just natural leaf die-off. We're going to remove them anyway. So, pair of sharp scissors, you come in and just give it a cut. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, so I just cut into the stem. You don't want to do that, but doing it one hand with the camera, sometimes you make a mistake. That will be okay. So we remove those leaves. Eventually I'll probably remove this one, but you can see now you have the airflow. I've got the mulch down for moisture management. If you don't like the yellow right here, again, that's nothing to worry about. You can cut part of the leaf. You don't need to take the whole thing off. So we'll just remove that. And now we have a tomato that's set up for the bottom pruning. We did the 2 stems. We're doing double stem. Could be 1 stem, could be 3 for triple stem. But you get the basic idea. And that's how you prune and manage a tomato plant. This is my Brandywine pink. We're going to bottom prune it out a little bit, get that airflow going. And this plant has not been pruned. Now it's probably, you know, I don't know, a good 3 feet tall, if not a little bit taller. You want to start this a little bit earlier. You never really want to remove more than 30% of the plant at once. You know, bottom prune, wait a week, come back and prune again. But you got a lot of leeway, so don't over worry about that. There's a lot going on with this plant. Coming up from the bottom, you see some leaves. That's just normal die-off. That's nothing to worry about. We're going to be removing those. Coming out of the main stem, this is a sucker that turned into a production stem, and it's coming all the way out here. Remember, I've been telling you tomatoes are vines. This would just sprawl along the ground, root out wherever the vine touches the ground, and it would continue to produce. When you come up here, you see flowers are going to be forming, and this would just produce a lot of tomatoes. As we continue back upwards, here's another sucker that turned into a production stem. I want to get rid of that. I've got one back here. I want to remove that. So I'm going to remove those 3 first to start getting this bottom pruned. I just don't want these wild suckers, production stems going everywhere. They're just going to grow into the other plants over here, and it's going to be too big and too out of control. You can let it go if you want, but remember, if you're going to let a tomato kind of get out of control and just grow normally like it's meant to in nature, you want to put a lot more spacing there. Like maybe put one plant here, skip this plant, this is one we've already pruned, and then let one grow over there. So let me switch hands. Let me switch hands real quick. I just use sharp scissors and just get in there and you cut. And we're going to cut this one back here, and we're going to cut this one down here, and then let's remove them. And look how much is on here. I mean, this was a lot of the plant, and they were all going to produce tomatoes. But I want to get rid of the bottom, and it's still a lot of tomato plant left. It's going to be healthier in the long run, because as that humidity comes and the heat starts to come, you know, bigger plants struggle. You need more water. So once that's done, I'm going to get in here, cut off some of the leaves. I think there's a leaf over here I want to get to. See if I can do it. Just snap it down. And I've opened up the bottom. Now, you know, maybe in another 5-7 days, I'll remove some more of the leaves up here. I'd like to leave maybe about 12 inches or so. This plant's going to get a good 5, 6, 7 feet tall. And then the pruning down at the bottom may be 12 to 18 inches. We'll just see how it goes. Now when I'm looking in here, I do see some leaves that have yellow on it, like one right there, one right up there. That's nothing to worry about. Again, follow me and I'll show you how to identify diseases. You can just cut off that leaf, parts of it. You don't have to remove the whole thing. Just in case you're worried about it, just get rid of it. Here's one right here. That doesn't look like the best. I'm going to remove that. So what we're left with now are a bunch of leaves and production stems. And I can tell you from experience, here's the main stem going straight up, straight up, straight up, and we would just keep that if we were going to do single stem pruning. Tie it off just like that. Coming out of an old joint, sucker, 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 and then one back there, suckers. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 stems on here that are going to produce flowers and fruit, and that might be too many. So I'm going to make a decision right now, and I'm going to remove this one, and I'm going to actually remove that one. They're pretty big, and I'm removing a lot of the plant. Let's see if we get that in there. And I've really opened up this plant, and now it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main vines that are going to produce, and I'm going to keep them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie them up to the stake so that they, you know, stay supported, grow vertically, and I will just, you know, tend to prune them out over time, remove some leaves, remove future suckers and stuff like that. But you can go with as many stems as you want, and I kind of call this, I mean, this one's a little bit organized in that I'm keeping 4 or 5, but sometimes I let 6, 8 go. Sometimes I prune some at the bottom, I let some go at the top. I call it chaos pruning. I don't want to try and confuse you, but I just want to let you know that there's no perfect way to pruning. I like the shape of this tomato from the bottom, opened up. 5 stems up here that are going to produce tomatoes, so now I'm going to secure them to the post. I really like how this guy looks. Bottom prune for the airflow, remove some of the lower suckers, production stems, left about 5 of them up top. This is really multi-stem pruning, and if I had a specific way that I'd characterize my pruning, this is pretty much what I do. I like leaving 4 or 5 stems to produce tomatoes. And remember, reducing the suckers, taking away the production stems, doesn't get you more tomatoes. It actually takes tomatoes away. So 5, 6 stems all tied up nicely to the post. This plant's going to be beautiful. After you do a pruning like this, I recommend just giving your plant a quick drink of any diluted water-soluble fertilizer. Just water it in, give it plenty of water, a little bit of fertilizer, and let it get back to growing. Over time, I will go into the joints, like wherever you would see a leaf or a stem, and even though I remove tiny suckers out of here, they're going to grow back. I'm going to keep removing the suckers out of the joints. So we have multi-stem pruning over here. Already talked about single stem, double stem, triple stem pruning here. And now we're coming over to a plant that will be a little bit maybe like my chaos pruning, but I'm going to just do this in video, and you can just watch me how I remove the bottom leaves, select and keep certain production stems, and tie it up. This is a homestead variety tomato. It's going to be about baseball-sized tomatoes, semi-determinate. It still gets 4 or 5 feet tall. I like leaving the multiple stems on here. This is generally how I prune, so I just wanted to do this in real time and just show you the principles. I'm going to get in first, and make some decisions on what suckers I'm going to remove, which are again production stems, and remove leaves from the bottom. But you can just watch this, you know, in real time, and this is pretty much how I do it. So I go right into the center of the tomato and I look to see what's down at the bottom, and I've got a bunch of suckers that have turned into large stems. I'm going to remove those. I'll show you everything I take out of this plant too at the end. And that's starting to open up the bottom. Now I'm going to do a count, and I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stems up here. So I'm going to remove this one. And I'm removing a lot of tomatoes, but if I don't remove this growth, everything, and as I remove the growth, I'm removing, you know, future tomatoes, but being able to take care of the plant up here, I'm going to get tons of tomatoes, but I'm really reducing the size. And you can see it's starting to open up a little bit. So now I'm going to go down into the bottom, remove leaves. Just take that out. You can see the space opening up nicely. And then I'm going to assess again. Back here, there's a leaf flopping down. I'm going to get rid of that. As I find where it is. I also have the sun coming in this way. So any leaves that are buried down low, they're not going to really be bringing in sun. Also a chance that they may get diseases or issues like that. Looks pretty good. Assessing it again, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 potential stems for production. I'm pretty happy with that. I have a big leaf right here. I'm going to remove that. Remove this one, remove that one, cut this one back. And I'm really opening up the bottom. So this is about 30% of the plant. I really like how this looks now. And then I'm just going to tie it up. So I'll go with the main stem first. We're going to tie it right here. Don't tie it super tight to the stake. We'll take this one from back here. Watch you don't knock any tomatoes off that are forming. As I tie it up, I'm thinking about, am I still going to keep everything? Need a little bit more of the jute. See if I can get a piece. Let's tie this one back, or up. And I can see like 6 or 8 clusters of flowers. They're all going to turn into tomatoes. Now I've got this guy hanging right here, and I don't really need it, so I'm going to remove it. Remember, every stem that I keep is going to keep producing flowers. Flowers, flowers right in there. And then I've got one more back here I have to tie up. Get that tied off real quick. Now after I've done all this pruning, this is when I would typically come in with my antifungals and spray everything. So I have one more left, this guy, and I'm trying to decide if I'm going to keep it, and I am. I'm going to let this one grow right up there. And that's going to leave me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stems that are going to produce. Let me just tie it up. Whoop, lost the handle here. It is 95 degrees today and it's humid. Now you don't have to remove this entire leaf. I'm going to just remove a little bit, keep the airflow in, half of this leaf. And I think this guy looks great. Give it a drink of water. A little bit diluted water-soluble fertilizer to get it on track. And this is typically how I prune the rusted garden. 5-6 stems. I prune well in June and July. Later in July things kind of get chaotic and I kind of let them go. But I like the way this looks. Pruned out from the bottom, 5 or 6 stems left. The homestead looks great. This is everything that I took off of that plant. And that was, you know, a lot more than 30%. You can remove a lot. You know, I just don't want people to overdo it. This is probably almost half of the plant. Big drink of water, fertilizer will get it back on track. And then I would go in and start making sure that in between the joints, like here's one of the stems I'm keeping, main stem, technically speaking, leaf comes out, stem continues. Right in here is a sucker, so I'm going to remove that. So after I'm done shaping it, keeping 5-6 stems, I look for the other suckers and I remove them. And these plants are going to look beautiful. Let me just step back because this is what we ended up with. Get my tripod out of the way. I mean, they really look nice. Double stem there, multi-stem to the right, multi-stem to the left. And this is technically, you know, how I really prune the rusted garden. Wanted to briefly talk about diseases. So as it gets warmer, it's 95 degrees today, humid, we've been getting heat, plants are getting bigger, you got to water more frequently. When tomato plants are in need of water, nutrition, they take nutrition from the bottom leaves, they send it upward for upward growth. Those patterns on there really aren't a disease. They look a little bit like it, but as the leaves get weaker, sometimes fungi and problems attack the weak leaves, things die off, it's normal. I'm not too worried about it. I don't see a whole lot going on these leaves. I'm going to bottom prune them up. But when you start seeing yellowing, you don't necessarily have to panic, but you might want to increase the watering, give them a light feed, remove the damaged leaves, and if you're not sure what it is, give them your anti-fungal spray or use the hydrogen peroxide. I'll link the video, in the video description I will link hydrogen peroxide spray. But I will be talking about that a little bit more towards the end of this longer video. Again, use timestamps to jump around. But just because you see yellowing at the bottom of your plant, it doesn't mean you need to panic. These have to get pruned up. So I'm going to remove those leaves, prune these plants, get them back on track. Here are 3 more plants that I'm going to prune. I'll do a before and after. I'm not going to get technical with each one of them. I just showed you how to do that. But this is what they look like before. Go to bottom prune, probably keep 4 or 5 stems on each of them, and then I'll show you the after. And I'll do the same thing with the group over there so you can get a sense of what pruning looks like and how to do it. I really like the before and after. I think that's a great way to teach. Maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes to take care of these plants, tie them up. Removed a lot from the bottom. Just wanted to show you the decisions I made. Real quick, I decided to go with multi-stem pruning on this one. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 stems left on Aunt Ruby's German Green. On the Golden Jubilee, as I was removing it, it's a little bit of a smaller plant. Decided to go with the double stem. Main stem goes up this way. Decided to leave that production stem, just 2 of them, creates a Y. It'll be 2 stems going up, double stem pruning. And over here on the pink oxheart, I think there's 3 main stems left, maybe 4. More multi-stem. I really wasn't trying to go with 3 production stems. Removed a lot from the bottom. That's going to be plenty of tomatoes. So 3 or 4 stems, 2 stems that are going to produce, I think 5 over there. That's going to be plenty of tomatoes in this space. And I've really opened up the bottom for that airflow, managed the size of the plant, and then I'm actually going to get in, I'll show that at the end of the video, and just spray my antifungal on there to take care of the plants. Here's my 3rd group of 3 tomatoes. Going to prune them up the same way. Here's the before. I'll show you the after. Different varieties. They're all indeterminate type. And I just wanted to show you this guy real quick because I've been talking about this through the video. Lots of yellow leaves. Nothing to really worry about in the way of disease. This variety just tends to get more beat up in my area. So this will get a bigger drink of water-soluble fertilizer once I remove the yellow leaves. The guy over here has massive vines already, tons of tomatoes, so I'm going to pull them up. We'll see how I decide to prune these as I get started. Again, you can see all the stems and leaves that I've taken off the plants. This is the final grouping of 3. I think it looks pretty good. Removed everything that you see down there. Opened up the bottom, as I've been saying, really important. And pretty much kept the giant Belgium at about 3 stems. The green zebra here is a little bit more, even though it's multi-stems, it's more a bit of my chaos pruning. I can tell I'm doing my chaos pruning when I have so much jute and string tying up stuff in there. But I will remove the leaves in about a week or so, let the airflow get through the plant. Really like the amount of tomatoes on here. Didn't feel like I needed to cut this down to, 2 stems, 3 stems. I'm just going to manage the leaves now and let the air, like I was saying, flow through there. And the old German had 3 stems, so really coming up from one point for whatever reason. You could see the 3 in there. So I'm going to keep that at 3 stems. As you go up the plant, I'm letting some of the suckers come out, and there'll be more than 3 stems, but I'm going to manage that differently as the plant gets taller. If you want to subscribe and follow me, I'll show you how I manage the tomato plants at different sizes throughout the season. But I think these look pretty good. They're set up. So now I want to talk about cherry tomatoes, because I do prune those a little bit differently, and I do grow them differently. Now, cherry tomatoes are a whole different beast when it comes to the indeterminates, where you're getting 4, 6, 8, 10 1-pound fruit. Cherry tomatoes, the whole goal is to have tons of flowers, tons of fruit. And you can see there's a cluster right there. There's a cluster back there. Here's a cluster. There's a cluster. Another cluster. And there's more back there. Once you remove the fruit, new flowers don't really come up in between here. They will send out new suckers, like we've been talking about, to become production stems. They will produce flowers. So you can prune, number 1, a cherry tomato like I showed you, but pruning a cherry tomato down to 1, 2, 3 stems just doesn't make sense to me, because you want hundreds of cherry tomatoes coming off the plant. I don't even really stake them anymore, because so many of the suckers I let just grow so that they flower and produce. So I like using this cattle panel. And you can see, well, let's just do a count. First of all, for pruning, I'm going to prune this plant. I'm just going to remove a lot of the flowers. Not the flowers. I'm going to remove a lot of the leaves. I'm still going to make a gap down here of a good 12 to 18 inches over time as the plant grows, so that it creates that disease and splash barrier. But I'm not going to remove many of the suckers. I'm going to let them turn into stems so that I get beautiful clusters of cherry tomatoes like you see back there. As we get into July and the plant is really branched out all over the place, I will just remove stems, leaves, and stuff to maintain the size. So I like growing them up cattle panel, because I weave them and I make this big wall of cherry tomatoes. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the main stem 6, one coming out there 7 stems that are all producing tomatoes. So what I typically do is I just gently press them into the squares. Now, tomatoes are fragile. They snap really easily. I just press them right into the cattle panel. And I let them grow. And here's another cluster right up there. So I just want to explain that again. As the vines grow and the production stems grow, they're going to flower. But the old flowers, where you pick the fruit from, they're not going to get new flowers forming in there. It's always going to be like a new sucker coming out. Like there's one right there. I would let this grow, and I would keep weaving it up the cattle panel. So my strategy is just a little bit different with cherry tomatoes. So hopefully that makes sense. So I do more of a weave and just, tuck them in and out of the cattle panel. I'm going to show you another place too. And then I just remove the leaves from the bottom. Let me do that so you can just see the minor pruning that I do on this plant. It is, again, 90 degrees, and my dog Willow's hanging out with me. You're going to hear her panting. So this is one of the smaller cherries, and it was pretty easy just to move into the cattle panel. And then up close, I do tie it to the panel. And that's just to get that wall of cherry tomatoes going. Now they're kind of fragile. I've already lost 5 of the tomatoes. They fell off the vine, so just be careful. remove these leaves from the bottom, and you can see that it's opened up. And I will water it in, give it that light feeding of a water soluble, and I will just let this grow upward. Now this cherry tomato variety stays a little bit more in control. Of course, I forget what it is because your marker is only as good as the marker stays on the piece of wood there. So I'm gonna have to go back, check my notes, etc. But this guy grows a little bit more slowly. But keep in mind, cherry tomatoes are just aggressive growers. You're gonna need a lot of space, and you really do wanna prune them, I think, in a limited way so you get masses of cherry tomatoes. This is the other side of the cattle panel, and I used to put 4 tomato plants down the side. Blackberries moved in over there. I would put 4 over there. It was just way too many because, again, cherry tomatoes are just aggressive growers. Over here I have the standard indeterminates that you saw in the beginning of the video. These will all get pruned up, but right now these are nice cherries. I mean, they're growing all over the place, and you can see one plant back there. This one's growing out that way. Here's another one in here growing this way. Let me weave all this up, prune out the bottom, show you what it looks like so you get a sense of how I use the cattle panel. And you can see everything along the bottom, and then we'll get up close and I'll show you the tomatoes on there. Here are the other 2 cherries. Haven't been pruned yet. Gonna set them up in the cattle panel, and you can see how they're, you know, starting to come out. But I just wanted to show you the before. Gonna prune them up. You'll see the after. Also gonna take care of some of the bigger tomato plants right here. But the whole idea, again, with cherry tomatoes is really just getting them into a basic shape, letting them grow, letting them take off. And as they get bigger and bigger, you're going to be pruning more and more, but you really want to keep tons of flowers on there so you get tons of fruit. The cherry tomato area is all cleaned up. Took out whatever weeds were in the middle, got rid of the lettuce, lifted up the indeterminates, the bigger tomatoes, like I showed you earlier in the video. And the whole key is really keeping a lot of the vines going, the production stems, the suckers, and you can see all the tomatoes. Now as the flowers form tomatoes and I pick them, if I'm not letting in more of the suckers to turn into production stems, I'm going to run out of tomatoes. So you always want with your cherry tomatoes to have more stems coming in, forming, creating the flowers, and again, we call them suckers, I call them production stems. But the whole idea, keep that plant producing the suckers, turn into production stems, and you keep getting cherry tomatoes. Mostly what I did was really took the leaves off the bottom. I do recommend that. As these get bigger, I will remove more of them. As the tomatoes get eaten from down there, I will just keep removing the leaves, and then I'm going to be letting all the suckers and production stems form up here and weave them throughout the cattle panel. But this is one way that I like to grow my cherry tomato plants. For tomato staking, I just want to show you the best thing that you can buy. These are metal T-posts that you see with the white tips on there. They're from Tractor Supply. The ones that are in the ground are 8 foot. This is a smaller one. I just want to show you what it looks like. T-post has that T shape, solid metal. This is the bottom where my hand is. This goes into the ground about 12 inches to 18 inches. Really secure. It's going to stay there forever. The reason I recommend these, and they're going to cost you, you know, a good amount of money, $8 or $9, but they're going to last 20, 30, 40 years. They're just not going to go anywhere. You can get cheaper wooden stakes. These are 1x1s, and you get these at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can get them, I think they're actually 8 feet. However, they decay, and they're still going to cost you $6 or something like that, and you can see how they rot. So the bottom always breaks. So you go from 8 feet, and then you're down to 7 feet, then you're down to 6 feet. The T-posts are worth the investment, especially if you're going to be gardening for a long time. They're just not going to go anywhere. I just set up 9 in this space. They stay there, you know, year round. They do really well. Wooden posts are cheaper, but they're going to decay, they're going to break down. And you do want at least an 8-foot post, because your indeterminate tomatoes can easily grow 6, 7, 8 feet. If you're growing the determinate type tomato plants, the ones that get to a set height, maybe 3 or 4 feet, you can go ahead and get tomato cages. But there's 2 types. This is the fragile one that's not really worth it. That's not going to hold, definitely won't hold an indeterminate tomato. So maybe sometimes people use these to get the plant started. They add the stake later. But these are just too thin. Okay for pepper plants. Spend up a little bit more and get the tomato cage that is a thicker gauge right here. And they're just beautiful. These are perfect for pepper plants, eggplant, your determinate variety tomato plants. Indeterminates are just going to get bigger. Some people like to use these for the indeterminate types, and then they add a stake in later and just grow that way. But it's really up to you. But I just wanted to be clear that you want to spend the extra money for this type of cage because you're going to hate these. You spend those, they bend, they get beat up, they don't hold. Spend the extra money. Tomato staking is pretty straightforward. You can find other things for stakes, but the T-posts are just solid. The indeterminate tomatoes get really heavy, and they're going to put a lot of weight, you know, sometimes 50, 60 pounds onto the post that you're putting into the ground. So I do recommend the metal T-posts. All right, so let's do a sucker test, see how you do with identifying tomato suckers. Please subscribe. I've already done a video about a week ago on growing zucchini if you want to check that out. And I'll be doing a full video on growing cucumber plants, really from start to finish. How do you take care of them throughout the summer? So here are some of the plants that I cleaned up over the video. And let's start here and see if you can identify where the sucker is. Which one of those do you think is the sucker? And again, you go up the stem, whatever stem you grab, it goes up this way. The leaf comes out right here and right in the joint. That is the sucker. You can break that off. Now what's cool about this, when your suckers are about this size, maybe a little bit bigger, take them in the house, put them by a sunny window, drop them in water, and these are going to root out. And that's how you make a tomato clone. So you could actually clone whatever plant you're growing by just taking a sucker when it's maybe an inch taller than this, somewhere between this size and an inch taller, drop it in water, and you're going to get a clone. It's going to take about 4 weeks for it to really root out. All right, let's take a look in another place for a sucker. Let's see what we have. I removed a lot of them. Here's one over here. So a bit of a challenge. There are actually 2 suckers in here. Can you identify where they are? So you have, where I grabbed it is that main stem, and we come up the stem. Let me make sure I get everything in. The leaf is right here, coming out, and right in that joint is a sucker. It's really small. You can just pinch that out. Continue up the stem, up that way. The leaf comes out, and then right here in the joint is another sucker, and you can just pinch that out. And the reason that you want to remove the ones that are up top here is for, like this one, I think we have just say 3 suckers we let grow into production stems, and they're coming up. Everywhere there is a leaf, everywhere there's a stem and leaf joint, a sucker's going to form. So you want to be pruning those out. Over time I let them go. All right, let's find one more. Let's see. All right, so we'll come over to here. We see a flower cluster, a stem, a leaf. In that mess right there, which one is the sucker? And if you guess this one, you're right. You have the stem coming up, going this way, the leaf over here, and right in the joint is a little sucker. And then finally, after you're done pruning, you've cleaned up the area, it's time for your antifungals. And again, please subscribe. I have over 1,500, probably 1,600 YouTube videos now, and you can just go on my channel. You can search baking soda spray, hydrogen peroxide spray, antifungals, and you'll find the different recipes that I use for spraying. Today I'm actually using a mixture of baking soda and milk. It's not quite ready for prime time yet. I'm experimenting with it. But you pick your antifungal and you just want to be on a routine. That is what is most important. You can spray every 7 days, 10 days, 14 days. It's going to depend on how much rain you get, what kind of spray you're putting down. But I know that early blight is coming to my garden. Usually comes at the end of June, beginning of July. So now I want to spray. This is a 2-gallon sprayer. This is just a basic Home Depot brand, which I do recommend. It's inexpensive and they're pretty durable. So mix your sprays, and then you're going to come in, and the best time to spray really is not 3 p.m. like I'm doing right now, but early in the morning, later in the evening. You really don't want to spray in direct sun, although I've never had much damage from that. So you're going to soak the tops of the leaves really well. You want to get on the underside, soak the undersides, and that's how I apply any of my antifungals, and you let it dry. If we're coming over to here, again, we're just using a nice fine spray, making sure everything is evenly covered. Get inside, and I like doing this after you prune it because we've taken out the leaves on the bottom. It's real easy to get under there, spray the undersides of the leaves, and this way let's get back there. This way you have your antifungal on your plant, top sides, undersides, and I will go ahead and do this for all of my plants. Again, the routine is more important than picking the specific fungicide. If you're not spraying, your plants are susceptible to fungus. So just get the routine down, whatever works best for you. Every 7, 10, 14 days, spray as regularly as you can, and you'll keep the fungus off your tomato plants. Thanks again for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com and give my channel a try. Over 1,600 videos. Most of them are short. I am doing some longer videos like this, but any video that is 20, 30, 40 minutes long is going to have timestamps so you can just jump around. Thanks for watching.